Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from the sugarhuddle.com. Every single week, I do a thing called NFL betting lines and picks, and I do it for every week. I do it on Tuesdays, and you can go to the sugarhuddle.com to check it out for yourself. But anyways, I haven't had time to do weekly videos on it yet until now. I meant to do this video a day earlier, so my apologies for that. But anyways, I take lines from the Westgate, Las Vegas, which is like the largest sports book, and whatever the lines are, Tuesday morning, I go by that. So sometimes there's no lines, so I do pick'ems for those games. And then also the games where there's a full point line, meaning, say somebody's favored by 4 points, I add a half point, and then I do an asterisk on when I write the article on the website. So we'll go over that. But anyways, I haven't had time to do the first 4 weeks, unfortunately, but now I want to try to do the rest of the season and playoffs if I can. So without further ado, let's talk about Week 5 NFL betting lines and picks. Again, I wrote this on Tuesday, so some of these lines have changed. Be aware that the lines constantly change leading up to the games, but so be it. You get the point. Anyways, I'm going to go on down the line. I wrote these all down, and then we'll talk about them individually. So the Thursday night game is the Colts at the Patriots. Patriots, 10-point favorite with my adjusted line, 10.5. I still think they find a way to cover that, even though it's a big line. Sunday early games, Ravens at Browns. That was a no line at the time from Westgate, Las Vegas. I've heard that. I think the Browns are like a 3.5-point underdog now. Either way, I'm going to take the Ravens, but in this case, it'll be a pick'em. Jaguars at Chiefs. That's arguably the game of the week. That's a 3.5-point. The Chiefs are a 3.5-point favorite at home, and of course, that's an adjusted line. They were actually a 3-point favorite before I added the half point. I'm actually going to go with the Jaguars on that. I think the Chiefs will beat them by 3, but anyways, we'll get to that in a little bit. Titans at Bills. Titans, the adjusted line, they're a 3.5-point favorite. That's a very small line going against a team like Buffalo, but I think the Titans cover. Giants at Panthers. Panthers, 6.5-point favorite. I like the Panthers. Broncos at Jets. Jets are actually a 2.5-point favorite at home, but I actually like the Broncos in that one. Falcons at Steelers, that was another no line at the time. I think I heard the Falcons might be a 3.5-point favorite or 3.5 underdog, something like that. But anyways, at the time it was a no line, so I turned those into pick'ems, and I actually have the Falcons winning that on the road. The Packers, 1.5-point road favorite at Detroit. I actually like Detroit in that one. Dolphins at Bengals. I like the Bengals in that one. The Bengals are a 5.5-point favorite. Then the Sunday late games, Raiders at Chargers. The Chargers are a 6.5-point favorite at home, but I like the Raiders. Cardinals at 49ers. The 49ers are a 4.5-point favorite. That's with my adjusted line. They were originally a 4-point favorite. I like the Cardinals. Vikings at Eagles, NFC Championship game rematch. The Eagles at home are a 3.5-point favorite. Of course, that's an adjusted line. They were a field goal favorite. But anyhow, I like the Eagles either way. Rams at Seahawks. This was a really tough one. The Rams on the road are a 7.5-point favorite. That's an adjusted line as well. They were a touchdown favorite. But either way, I actually like the Seahawks in that one to cover. Sunday night game is the Cowboys at the Texans. I like the Texans are a 3.5-point favorite. I actually like the Texans in that one. And then Monday night game, the Redskins at the Saints. The Saints with the adjusted line, 7.5, originally a touchdown favorite. I actually like the Redskins. So anyways, those are all my picks, and so let's go on down the line here and kind of talk about them real quick. So Thursday night game, Colts at Patriots. Andrew Luck in his career has really struggled badly against the Patriots. He's had a lot of rough games. His stats, for the most part, haven't been horrible. They just haven't been great either. But big part of the problem is the Colts for many years, not a whole lot of defense, not a whole lot of good offensive line play, which means no running game. And even this year, they're showing a lot of improvement in a lot of areas, but the offensive line is still struggling. Still not really a whole lot of running game, and then defensively, they're just kind of mid-pack at best. But as we've seen every week so far, these Thursday night games are heavily favoring the home teams, and you have to think that on a short week, especially the Colts coming off of a deflating loss against the Texans in overtime, the Patriots with the blowout win over the Dolphins, you'd think the Patriots are going to probably clean up in this game. So I like the Patriots by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And throughout Luck's career, by the way, since coming in the league in 2012, played the Patriots a bunch of times, including the playoffs, gotten killed every single time, like big blowout losses. So I think this will probably be another one. And again, that's not on Luck. It's just, the situation he's in. The Sunday early games, the Ravens, Browns. Baker Mayfield didn't play bad last week, but he still had 4 turnovers. They still lost the shootout in Oakland, regardless of some of the officiating blunders. I just think that this is going to be the toughest challenge the Browns have faced all year. I mean, this is a really, really good Ravens team. Their offense is really good, and it's almost catching up to their defense. Their defense is great. They've got a top 10 run defense. The Browns have, I think, the second best rushing offense. I think they're first or second in attempts, first or second in rushing touchdowns, yards per attempt. They're also in the top 10. But again, they've faced a lot of cupcake defenses. Let's face it. I mean, they faced the Jets, the Steelers was the week 1 game. Last week against the Raiders, who couldn't tackle at all. I mean, it was kind of sad. I mean, they were missing a lot of tackles, and then the Saints, who've been down this year. So that's 4 defenses that really haven't been that great this year. And all of a sudden, you face an elite defense in Baltimore, one of your rivals. I don't care that's in Cleveland. Not much of a home field advantage either way because you're facing the Ravens. I think the Browns are going to be playing from behind, and I think they're going to have a heck of a time there, and maybe Mayfield turns over a few more times. So I like the Ravens. Even if they were like a touchdown favorite, I'd still take the Ravens. Jags-Chiefs, like I said, game of the week. I think the Chiefs might win by a field goal, but again, the 3.5-point line means the Jags would cover. This is an interesting game because something's got to give. You've got Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, the best in football, going against the Jags defense, who's the best in football. Who's going to win that battle? And I could see it going either way, which makes it really, really tough as far as fantasy football-wise. And I'll talk about that in my next video. I'm going to do a fantasy football studs, duds, and sleepers week 5 video because that's another thing that I haven't been able to do at this point. So look for that video next after this. But I think it's going to be sort of similar to what we saw on Monday night with the Chiefs at the Broncos, even though the Chiefs are going to be at home this time. I think Mahomes, as outstanding of a quarterback as he is, this is going to be his toughest challenge. He's another guy. I just talked about how the Browns kind of faced all these cupcake defenses. You look at the Chiefs' schedule so far, they faced the Steelers' defense. They faced the 49ers' defense. They faced the Chargers' defense week 1. And then last week was the best defense they faced with the Broncos, but even the Broncos aren't even as good as the Jaguars. Jaguars have, lights-out elite defense. Broncos aren't quite what they used to be. So I think even in Kansas City, I think that's going to be a game kind of similar to what we saw on Monday night where the Broncos hold Mahomes in check for 3 quarters, and then maybe the 4th quarter he comes alive, but it's going to be a down-the-wire game. And I would be surprised if either team scores much above 20 points. The Chiefs won 27-23 against the Broncos, and it might be a little bit slightly lower score when they beat the Jaguars, maybe like a 20-17 or something like that. Then the Titans-Bills, poor Buffalo. I mean, they're just really terrible this year. Their offensive line play. I was never crazy about Josh Allen to begin with, and I didn't think he should be a first rounder and all this other stuff. But at any rate, he's getting killed, so you can't really blame him too much because he shouldn't be playing this soon to begin with, and his offensive line's horrible, which means no running game. His receivers aren't that great, and the defense is sometimes terrible, sometimes mediocre at best. They were decent against Green Bay, but remember, they lost 22-0 at Green Bay because Josh Allen had 3 turnovers. He was sacked 7 times. Actually, a lot of those sacks were his fault. But either way, a lot of turnovers. There was 8 punts by the Bills. 7 of them were 3-and-outs. So that really puts your defense in a box. It keeps your defense on the field a lot. And so I think Marcus Mariota, who had a great week last week against the Eagles, big overtime comeback victory, I think that the Titans clean up. So I think the Bills continue their woes there. Giants and Panthers. Remember, the Panthers are coming off of bye week. They're at home. They just had that 10-point win against Cincy a couple weeks ago. Christian McCaffrey went off, 184 rushing yards and 28 carries. Career day for him. And, what's ironic about this, and I'm going to point this out in my fantasy article, is this past week, the Giants at home, no less, they faced the Saints, who have Alvin Kamara, who is very similar to Christian McCaffrey. And Kamara went off for 181 total yards of offense, 134 rushing, had the 3 second-half touchdowns. So I think McCaffrey and company could really give the Giants a heck of a time here. So I think that could be possibly a double-digit victory there. Broncos-Jets, it's a little bit of a head-scratcher why the Jets are a favorite here, but I also kind of understand it because it's going to be a slightly short week for the Jets going on the road. For the Broncos going on the road, and they're traveling cross-country all the way to East Rutherford, New Jersey. So that you got that factored in, and they just had this real deflating loss, a game they completely gave away against the Chiefs on Monday night at home, no less. So I can understand it, but I still think, as high on Sam Darnold as I am, real big on Sam Darnold. The thing is, he doesn't have a whole lot of weapons around him. The offensive line's not very good, and the Jets' defense really isn't anything special, to be honest with you. So I think the Broncos will definitely win that game, and I think that's one of those ones where I really don't like the home team being the favorite in that case, because I just don't see the Broncos laying down in that game. What else we got here? We got, the Falcons Steelers. Like I said, that's a pick 'em, and that line's since been changed, but that's going to be a shootout. Might be the highest scoring game of the weekend. Matt Ryan, the last couple of weeks, he's completed over 74% of his passes each of the last 2 weeks, 8 combined touchdowns, no interceptions. In fact, after that week 1 loss at Philly where the whole offense was terrible, last 3 weeks the offense has really been on, including going back to week 2 with a win over Carolina. I think he had two touchdowns and 1 pick, so it wasn't an amazing game, but nonetheless, he's really bounced back since week 1, and the Falcons offense in general. Unfortunately, their defense, which was so good last year, is terrible this year. So the way I look at it is, you know what? You got guys like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, all these other guys. Steelers' defense is terrible. They've got a lot of banged up defensive backs right now, the Steelers. And the funny thing about that is my dad, who's been a diehard Steelers fan for most of his life, the funny thing is, the thing he told me is, it doesn't matter that the Steelers have all these injured defensive backs. They all suck even when they're healthy. So either way, the Steelers are going to get shredded against the Falcons. But likewise, the Falcons, who also have injuries in their secondary and also don't have a very good defense, they're also going to get shredded by Big Ben. But I like the Falcons a little bit better because Ben is still mistake prone. The Steelers going into the Ravens game were the most penalized team in football. I didn't check the stat afterwards, but I'm pretty sure they're still, if they're not number 1, they're still second or third at the very worst, at the very best, very worst, whatever. So you have one of the most penalized teams of football. Big Ben's been really mistake prone this year. Matt Ryan's been a lot more flawless. He's looking like his 2016 MVP form, which is really encouraging for the Falcons. So I think this is going to be another shootout. Now, the Falcons have blown 2 fourth-quarter leads last couple weeks. 2 weeks ago against the Saints, and then last week against the Bengals. I think this time around they do hang on and win the ball game in Pittsburgh. Now, interesting thing about that is, remember, the Steelers and the Falcons, I want to say it was 2002. It was either 2002 or 2004. It was, I think it might have been I think it was 2002. Anyways, it was Mike Vick against the Steelers, whatever year it was. If it was 2002, it was like Tommy Maddox, and I think Tommy Maddox had like 400 and some yards passing. Mike Vick had a pretty good game. But anyways, that game ended in a tie, so that could possibly happen. The Steelers have tied once this year. Falcons have come close to tying, so who knows? Maybe these two teams will tie. The Steelers will come out of it with a second tie. You never know. But anyways, this could be a shootout. I just like the Falcons a little bit better because they don't turn it over as much. That's kind of the main reason, and Steelers are just kind of undisciplined, let's face it. Then, of course, Green Bay at Detroit. Green Bay always finds a way to beat the Lions. I mean, you got to hate it for Lions fans because the Green Bay just gets so lucky against them. Obviously, there was that Hail Mary Thursday night game a few years back. But I actually like Detroit to pull off the upset. You know what? They're really disappointed by losing in Dallas, and they're going to come back home. They know this is a big game for them. They know they need the win. I believe Detroit's 1-3 coming in this game, so they really, really need this win, and they definitely want to sink the Packers a little bit. So I actually think Detroit finds a way to pull it off. Aaron Rodgers in the Packers offense has been pretty mediocre the last couple of weeks, even against the Bills, because of the takeaways, because of the short fields off all the punts. That's why they were able to even kind of score 22 points. Rodgers only had a touchdown, and he had a pick. 298 yards, which is decent, but he was only like 22 of 40 doing it. So, he's a guy who completes like 10% more than that, and, they're not a very good completion percentage. So I think, again, there's the Packers offense is going to continue to be a little bit off, and that's why I like Detroit in that one. And then the final early game on Sunday is Dolphins at Bengals. Bengals 5.5-point favorite. Bengals on a roll. They didn't play very well against the Panthers a couple weeks ago, but they did a great job in a shootout last week in Atlanta. They were terrific that Thursday night home game against the Ravens. And then, of course, after a bad start at Indy, week 1, they came back and ended up winning by 11. There's just something different about Cincinnati this year, and I just look at it, and you know what? Dolphins are coming off that 38-7 loss. Ryan Tannehill got benched, and a lot of people say maybe it's just because they were getting blown out, and he's coming off of that torn ACL from last year. But again, there's, some people say, oh, maybe there is a quarterback controversy there, even if Brock Osweiler is the other guy. So, Dolphins have a middle of the road decent defense. They've got a good secondary. I want to say they either lead. I think they lead the league in interceptions, or they're up there. They're very close. But at Cincinnati, the way the Bengals are playing right now, I think they can win that game by a touchdown, so cover the spread. And the late games, the 4 late games, Raiders at Chargers, so many of these AFC West games have been shootouts. And when you've got the Raiders, when you got the Chargers, two teams that don't play defense, you've got Derek Carr on one side, Phillip Rivers on the other. Again, it's just going to be one of those things where both teams are constantly score points. The Raiders won 45-42 in overtime last week at home against the Browns. They've had some other high-scoring games. Chargers have a bunch of high-scoring games. They beat the Niners 29-27. And just for the record, just to let you know, if you don't get a chance to go back and read some of my previous betting line articles, which I hope you do, on thesugarhuddle.com, but in my Week 4 article last week, I thought the most confident pick I had last week was the Chargers, who were something like a 9.5 point favorite, 9.5 or 10.5 point favorite over the Niners, because remember, that was the first game without Jimmy G, who's done for the year with the torn ACL. I was certain that the Chargers were going to kick their butt, and Niners almost pulled it off. Chargers only won by 2. Nonetheless, neither team plays a whole lot of defense, but I trust Phillip Rivers more, and I think the Chargers can do a little bit more defensively. Raiders were mistake-prone in that game against the Browns and really should have lost because, again, there's some bad calls there. Cardinals at 49ers. 49ers, 4-point favorite when you don't add the half point. But either way, you know what? C.J. Beathard played pretty good last week, turned over a couple times in the second half, but I just, you know what? He started, I think it was like half a season or 5 or 6 games last year before Garoppolo came in and became the starter. Of course, before that, you had Brian Hoyer, who started at the very beginning of the year. But you know what? I don't know how much I really trust C.J. Beathard to play at a really good level every single week. You don't really have much of a running. I mean, you had a running game a couple weeks ago when you still had Jimmy G, but last week you had no running game because it was a little bit easier to figure out. Your defense isn't real great. And you know what? On the other side, Josh Rosen, he started his first career game last week. He did a lot better than the stats. He was 15 of 27, 180 yards and a touchdown, but he had like 6 or 7 drops. Larry Fitzgerald had like 2 of them, which is shocking. So he played way better than stats. And ESPN has that big made-up QBR stat, scale of 0 to 100. You want to be 75 or above. He was rated at 80.4 despite having less than 200 yards and barely completing half of his passes. So that shows you that, yeah, he really got screwed by his cast, by his receivers and everything. And, of course, the Cardinals can't run the ball because their line isn't very good. Their defense isn't very good either, so they could get into a shootout. But I think this could be similar to the Seahawks game last week where they end up losing on a down-the-wire field goal. So I think they either lose by a field goal, possibly they win by a field goal, but the Niners don't cover. I think they'll, at best, win by less than the 4.5, less than 4 in that case, 3 points. Vikings at Eagles, like I said, that was the NFC Championship game rematch. You know what? The Vikings, who had such an elite defense, are just really, really terrible. One of the things that we saw at times last year, for as great as they were last year, there were times last year where they gave up a lot of big passing plays, and it really bit them in the ass in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. Whole bunch of big pass plays they gave up, and that's why they got killed. I think, 38-7 final score, something like that. Nothing's changed. They gave up 465 yards and 5 touchdowns last Thursday to Jared Goff. Really doesn't matter that they have a couple of extra days of rest for this one, because Carson Wentz has looked pretty good his first couple of games back, and I think they're going to gash the Vikings again. Now, they're not going to blow out the Vikings or anything, but they're a 3.5-point favorite. I could see them winning by a touchdown, which is what the Vikings lost by last week. Kirk Cousins will also do his thing, and I think he'll have another really good game. But again, I think the defense is going to let him down, which is really unfortunate for Kirk because he's done a really, really nice job this year. But Alshon Jeffrey was great in his return last week, and I expect him to be great again. So I really like the Eagles to cover the spread. And like I said, maybe they end up winning by twice as much as what the spread was. 3.5-point spread, maybe they win by 7, something like that. In the final Sunday late game, you got the Rams at the Seahawks. The Rams on the road, 7.5-point favorite. And obviously, without adjusting that spread, it's a touchdown. But either way, on paper, it's easy to say that the Rams should win this game and win by maybe double digits possibly. But even though I think they'll still win the game, I think the Seahawks are going to play them really, really tough. Russell Wilson and company, they've rushed for well over 100 yards the last couple of weeks with 2 different running backs. I actually think Seattle's going to make this a down-the-wire game, probably fairly similar to their Cardinals game last week, but I think in this case it'll be a little bit higher scoring because, you look at the Rams, they're not playing very good defense right now because of the injuries they have. And the Seahawks, they're not going to have their greatest defensive game because of who they're going up against. But I think it'll be like a 31-27, 30-27 type game. I think the Rams will edge them out. But the Seahawks are going to be right there back and forth, and they're going to cover. Then you got Sunday night, Gabe. That's Dallas at Houston, battle of Lone Star State. Both teams are pretty desperate. Houston just got their first win barely last week. They're 1-3. Dallas is 2-2. They could easily be 1-3 as well. So neither team can afford to lose this game. If Houston loses and falls to 1-4, they're definitely done as far as the playoff hunt. But if they win and they're 2-3, then they're in good shape. Dallas falling to 2-3, being in the NFC, they're not in such good shape. You know what? Dallas played really, really well last week. They actually blew a 10-point lead, and they almost lost the game at the end. But Dak Prescott, 255 yards. It was his first 200-plus passing yard game in 9 games. He had gone 8 games and 9 of the last 11 without getting to 200 passing yards or more. So that just goes to show you how anemic the Cowboys' offense has been. But, Ezekiel Elliott, he went off last week. He's actually had back-to-back 100-yard games. Dak at 255 yards, made some really important throws. And I thought a lot of the receivers, for all the criticism they get, actually stepped up pretty well last week. Looking at guys like Jeff Swaim, Allen Hurns, Cole Beasley, none of them put up big numbers, but they made some important catches throughout. And even Michael Gallup, the rookie, the third-round rookie from Colorado State, he had like 2 catches for 45 yards, but, pretty important catches there. But, the way I look at it is I don't know if Dak's going to have another game like that, even though 255 yards isn't a lot. I'm not sure he's going to do that 2 weeks in a row. Dallas is too hard to trust. And a big problem I have, too, is Zeke banged up his knee last week, and the Texans have a pretty good run defense, pretty good front seven. They've got J.J. Watt who can get after it. So I think this is going to be a game where Houston, with that terrible secondary, is going to force Dak to throw it a lot. And maybe he does well, but I just have a feeling that Houston at home, Deshaun Watson, he's going to put up a lot of points against that Dallas defense. Let's face it, Dallas defense isn't very good right now, especially without Sean Lee. We know how terrible they always are when Sean Lee's out. So I like Houston to cover that. I think Houston can win by a touchdown. That's a 3.5-point non-adjusted spread, but I think Houston can win it by a touchdown. And finally, Monday night game. This is a tricky one. It's the Redskins at the Saints. The Saints, before I adjusted the line, they were a touchdown favorite, but the Redskins, they're coming off of bye week. They have one of the best defenses in football right now, believe it or not, after the last few years being terrible under Jay Gruden. But going to New Orleans, especially a primetime game, that's hard for anybody, no matter how good your defense is. I don't care if you're Jacksonville. I don't care if you're Baltimore or whoever. That's a really, really tough matchup. And I'm still going to pick the Redskins to cover because I think they can get inside of 7 and barely cover, maybe lose by like 5 or 6, because we know the Saints haven't really played lights out this year by any means, and Washington could win it. But I think the Saints will win at home, but I just think that, Washington's not going to be as strong defensively as they've been this year, because this is going to be a really tough test, trying to shut down Kamara and all those receivers, and Drew Brees should have a decent game. And then on the other side of it, New Orleans hasn't been great defensively all year long. Alex Smith's the guy that's not going to usually beat you too much, but remember, they've got Adrian Peterson, who's done pretty good for the most part this year. And one thing that's interesting of note is, remember, the bad blood Adrian Peterson had with Sean Payton. He called for his release because he didn't want to play in New Orleans after a few weeks last season, and then he ends up going to the Cardinals. So maybe there's going to be a little bit of a revenge factor for Adrian Peterson. He'll run even harder than he already does. Interesting game, but I actually like Washington to find a way to cover. So the Skins will cover within a touchdown. But anyways, those are my Week 5 betting lines and picks. Please go to sugarhuddle.com. Check out the website. You can read the full article and get a more in-depth analysis. Also, check out my Fantasy Studs, Duds, and Sleepers Week 5 article, and obviously my previous week's articles as well. But anyways, I'm going to have the Fantasy Studs, Duds, and Sleepers Week 5 video very soon after this, so look for that. But anyways, those are my Week 5 betting lines and picks. Hope you enjoyed, and talk to you again soon.